Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. It is a truly incredible time to be following this country with so much change happening in the world. It is a pleasure that I can share this with you every day and that I can work on this material every day. So thank you so much, everybody. And with that said, let's jump in. This week, Chinese financial media outlet Caixin published an excellent long-form report on China's local fiscal crisis and the urgent need for reform. By domestic Chinese standards, the report, though couched in PC language, is deeply critical of the state and the economic system and basically says that it's over for the current fiscal model. Chinese analysts argue that China's local governments are under increasing financial strain. This will be no news to regular China Update viewers, with declining revenues and raising expenditures creating an urgent need for reform. Recent years have seen growing distress, from delayed civil servant salaries to cuts in public services. While the economic downturn and real estate crisis have exacerbated these issues, experts argue that the root cause lies in structural imbalances in the distribution of financial responsibilities between the central and local governments, as well as the growth model itself, which sets the growth target above what the economy would achieve under more free market conditions. According to estimates by Caixin, China's broad fiscal revenue fell by 2% to approximately $3.9 trillion in 2024, compared to a 6.2% increase in 2019. The decline in land use sales, a primary source of extra budgetary local government revenue, has been particularly damaging. Over the past 3 years, land sales revenue has plummeted, with cumulative losses exceeding 3 trillion yuan. The core issue is an outdated fiscal framework. The 1994 tax sharing reform significantly increased the central government's revenue share from 22% in 1993 to 55.7% in 1994, but left governments responsible for much of the expenditure on public services. While reforms in 2016 sought to clarify these responsibilities, they failed to alleviate local governments' financial burden. Put simply, the central government gets most of the tax revenue, while local governments are forced to do most of the spending. It is no surprise, then, that so many local governments have crippling debt burdens or are in a state of de facto bankruptcy, while the central government's balance sheet seems to be relatively clean. The latest fiscal reform seeks to address the long-standing mismatch between spending responsibilities and financial resources. Experts argue that the first step is to clearly delineate the administrative responsibilities of different levels of government. Transfer payments should then be used to bridge financial gaps, ensuring that local governments have adequate resources without creating inefficiencies. However, there is still the deep structural issues of local fiscal discipline, or lack thereof. Despite Beijing's efforts to curb reckless borrowing, local government debt continues to rise. The 1994 tax reform initially incentivized local governments to attract investment, but a 2014 revision of the budget law allowed them to issue bonds, leading to increased debt accumulation. In 2023, Beijing's transfer payments to local governments exceeded its own tax revenue, highlighting the financial unsustainability of the current system. China has responded with multiple debt restructuring programs, including a 10 trillion yuan debt swap in November of last year to replace off-balance sheet debt with official government bonds. However, experts warn that without deeper reforms, local governments may continue relying on borrowing to cover budget shortfalls. Indeed, as we have seen, localities from Zhou province to the northern port megacity of Tianjin, due to soft budget constraints, moral hazard, the incentives for local officials to reach growth and employment levels, and a complete lack of fiscal discipline, have fallen into a state of de facto bankruptcy. The Caixin piece concludes by saying that China's fiscal reform is a complex and long-term process requiring careful balancing of central oversight with local financial autonomy. However, the success of these reforms will depend on how effectively they address structural imbalances and incentivize responsible financial management at all levels of government. These will be very difficult reforms to achieve, especially considering over the last 5 years of attempting, very little progress has been made. Indeed, the systemic issues have only deepened. If these reforms fail, it will be catastrophic for China's economy, or worse. Next up, as the Dalai Lama approaches his 90th birthday this July, he has reignited debate over the future of his spiritual lineage. In his newly released memoir, Voice for the Voiceless, Over 7 Decades of Struggle with China for My Land and My People, the Tibetan Buddhist leader declares that his successor will be born outside of China in what he calls the free world. This marks the first time the Dalai Lama has explicitly stated that the 15th reincarnation will not be found within Tibet or China. For decades, he has hinted that he may reincarnate in exile, possibly in India, where he has lived since fleeing Tibet in 1959. Now he argues that the next Dalai Lama must be free to continue his spiritual mission without interference from the Chinese government. He writes, for example, quote, "Since the purpose of reincarnation is to carry on the work of the predecessor, the new Dalai Lama will be born in the free world so that the traditional mission of the Dalai Lama, that is, to be the voice for universal compassion and spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism and the symbol of Tibet, embodying the aspirations of the Tibetan people, will continue." End quote. Beijing, however, insists that it alone holds the authority to determine his reincarnation. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has cited its regulations on religious affairs and measures on the management of reincarnation of living Buddhas, which require that the search for the next Dalai Lama be conducted in China. In a truly Orwellian statement, the Foreign Ministry spokesperson expressed in a press event yesterday, quote, "The reincarnation of living Buddhas, including the Dalai Lama, must comply with Chinese laws and regulations." End quote. Obviously, the struggle over secession is more than a theological dispute. It is deeply political. The Dalai Lama's decision to separate political and religious leadership in 2011, when he transferred political autonomy to the Tibetan government in exile, underscores this shift. Experts suggest that an upcoming Tibetan religious conclave in July may bring further announcements on his secession plans. With this declaration, the Dalai Lama not only challenges China's claims over Tibet, but also ensures that the battle for Tibetan autonomy will continue beyond his lifetime. If you'd like to be on top of the most up-to-date analysis on China through grounded and sober analysis, maybe consider subscribing, hit the bell notification, and you'll be on top of these updates as they're released. If you're getting some value from today's episode of China Update, it's also a big help if you hit the like button. It's only 2 clicks of the mouse, but it's a big help for me and the channel. Let's continue. Next up, we move to China's Europe policy. China's Special Envoy for European Affairs, Liu Xiaoye, has sharply criticized the Trump administration's approach to European allies, calling it, quote, "appalling," end quote. His remarks highlight Beijing's continued push for Europe to assert greater strategic autonomy and distance itself from the US, which would be greatly in the interests of China. Liu, who previously stirred controversy by questioning the sovereignty of former Soviet states, made his comments while discussing transatlantic relations. He emphasized that the US's treatment of its European partners under Trump's leadership has been characterized by dominance rather than cooperation. Quote, "From a European perspective, it's quite appalling," end quote, he stated. His remarks align with broader Chinese diplomatic efforts to position Beijing as a more reliable and cooperative partner for Europe. This is something it's been pursuing for several years now. Liu also addressed concerns over China's stance on Russia, suggesting that if Beijing is accused of leaning towards Moscow, the US should face similar scrutiny, expressing, quote, "The US is not only leaning towards Russia, they are supporting Russia," end quote, he said, without elaborating. Meanwhile, Luo Qinjian, a spokesman for China's National People's Congress, reiterated China's commitment to fostering strong relations with Europe. He emphasized that China and Europe are partners rather than geopolitical rivals, and that both sides benefit from deeper cooperation. Beijing's priority in Europe policy these past several years has been preventing the EU and the US from aligning in one hawkish position on China. If it is able to take advantage of these current tensions between the US and her European allies, Beijing may see some success in these efforts. Next up, and finally for today. Yesterday we discussed China's push to close the gap in AI. Today we need to discuss its plans to dominate robotics too. China is doubling down on its commitment to robotics and embedded AI, positioning itself to lead the next industrial revolution. The country's ambitious investments in automation and artificial intelligence, backed by robust policy support, are expected to reshape global manufacturing and labor markets. Premier Li Qiang underscored this strategic importance of embedded AI in his government work report last week, stating, quote, "We will establish a mechanism to increase funding for industries of the future and foster industries such as biomanufacturing, quantum technology, embedded AI, and 6G technology." End quote. This aligns with a broader push by China to integrate AI into manufacturing, driving efficiency and reducing reliance on human labor. especially as China faces a collapse in its working age population. China's regions are responding with significant financial incentives. Guangdong province has unveiled a sweeping plan that includes up to $7 million in funding for national level manufacturing innovation centers and $1.3 million for provincial centers. Meanwhile, Beijing has launched a $13.8 billion 15-year investment fund specifically to bolster AI and robotics. Shenzhen too has introduced policies prioritizing AI development and embedded intelligence, emphasizing robotics innovation. A new report published yesterday by US-based Semi-Analysis titled "America is Missing the New Labor Economy, Robotics Part 1" paints a stark picture of China's growing dominance in the industry. Quote, "Automation and robotics is currently undergoing a revolution that will enable a full-scale automation of all manufacturing and mission-critical industries. These intelligent robotic systems will be the first ever additional industry piece that is not supplemental but fully additive. 24/7 labor with higher throughput than any human, allowing for massive expansion in production capabilities past adding another human unit of work. The only country that is positioned to capture this level of automation is currently China, and should China achieve it without the US following suit, the production expansion will be granted only to China, posing an existential threat to the US as it is outcompeted in all capabilities." End quote. China's advantages are well established, the report explains. It already leads in high-value manufacturing in industries such as batteries, solar panels, and electric vehicles. Robotics is the next frontier. The report highlights that China's competitive internal economy, economies of scale, engineering prowess, and of course massive state subsidies give it a significant lead. Quote, "There will be robotics systems manufacturing more robotics systems, and with each unit produced, the cost will be driven down continuously and the quality will improve, only strengthening their production flywheel." End quote. Chinese firms are making rapid advancements in AI-driven robotics too. AGBot recently introduced its first general-purpose embedded AI model, the Genie Operator 1, boasting a Vision Language Latent Action VILLA architecture that enables robots to learn from human videos and real-world scenarios. XPeng, a leader in electric vehicles, has announced plans to mass-produce its L3 humanoid robot by 2026. Bank of America analysts suggest that the cost of robots could follow the trajectory of electric vehicle prices, predicting a 70% cost reduction by 2030 if key components are produced in China. Quote, "The cost advantage of made in China can be evidenced by the explosive growth in the electric vehicle market," end quote, the report states. As China accelerates its push into robotics, it is also fostering public engagement. The world's first humanoid robot half-marathon will take place in Beijing in April of this year, a largely symbolic event showcasing advancements in embedded AI. China's rapid progress in robotics and AI could redefine the global manufacturing landscape, with the West lagging and China investing aggressively. The balance of technological power could be shifting. Unlike AI, where China is behind the US-led West, in robotics manufacturing, it is China that has the lead in the race for robotics supremacy. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a good Wednesday, and I will see you all tomorrow.